Shalom, it's Levi Shore. Welcome back to Swing Torah. Okay, we're doing Parsha Toldot, the story of the two twins, the stories of Yaakov and Esau, Jacob and Esau. And we're going to see how the story of these two twins has been the history of the Western world for the last 2,000 years. So it's really fascinating. So there's a concept in the Torah called Maisa Avos Siman Labanim, that the actions of the fathers, the actions of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the actions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob unfold into world history for us, for the children, and we see all of world history unfold from the lives of the Avos. We're going to see in Yaakov's life and Jacob's life how this becomes world history. Okay, we're going to take a look here at the Pesukim in the Torah. Let me see if I can size this up a little bit. Okay, so we're going to jump right in here. So we see the first pasuk here. So it's chapter 25 of Bereshis, 25 of Genesis, and it's pasuk, it's verse 23. So it says, Vayomer Hashem, La Shnei Goyim Bavitnech. So Hashem's talking to Rivka, he's talking to Rebecca, and Hashem's saying, he said, there's two nations in your stomach, in your womb. Ushnei Le'umim Me'ayich Yiparedu. There's two nations in your womb, and these two separate people, these two separate nations are going to come from you. They're going to come out from you. Ula'um Mila'um Ye'amatz. And it will be that to one nation from the other nation, it will become powerful. So only one nation will become powerful at a time. So when Edom, we're going to see that Edom is the Roman Empire, when they're powerful, and so we've been in this Gullus Edom, the exile of the Roman Empire for the last 2,000 years. And when they're powerful, that the Jewish people are not. And then Bezrat Hashem, in the coming of Mashiach, we'll see a king in Israel, and we'll see a switch finally to the days of Mashiach, where the children of Yaakov will become powerful. So and then Virav Ya'avod Seir, and the older one will serve the younger. So let's see, we'll keep going here. So then it says, the next pasuk is, Vayim Le'u Yamecha Laledes V'hine Somim Bevitna. And when it was time for her to give birth, she saw that there was twins in her womb. So Vayetze Harishon Admoni Kulo Kaderes Seyar. And the first one, he emerged red, and he was hairy, he was covered with hair. He was like a fully grown. Eisav means oseh, he means like made. So he was like a fully grown, he was a baby that looked like a fully grown man, and he was all ready to go. Eisav and the empire, the Roman Empire, were all ready to go from the beginning. He came off a beard with hair. He looked like a little man, and he was red. And the red represents, Edom represents, he has a warlike nature. Eisav and his children, they're going to be warriors. They're going to be empire builders. Vayikra'u Shemo Eisav, and he was named Eisav, and they named him Eisav. So Ve'achrechein Yatza Achiv, and then his brother came out. V'yado Chezes Be'akev Eisav, and his brother came out, and Yaakov comes out holding onto the heel of Eisav. He's holding onto the heel, and that's where we get the name Yaakov from Akev, from heel, which means that the empire, the empire of Messiah, empire of Mashiach, is going to follow the Roman Empire. It's going to be right, it's going to merge right after it. And so Vayikra Shemo Yaakov, and he was called Yaakov because this is going to be the one that's going to rule after the 2,000 years or so we've had of the Gullus Edom. We're in 2021 right now, about to go into 2022. Yitzchak ben Shishim Shana Beledes Osam. And Isaac, Yitzchak, was 60 years old when they were born. So Vayigdelu Hanaarim, and then the boys grew up. Vayihi Eisav Ish Yodeat Sayid. And Eisav, he was a skillful hunter. Ish Sadeh, he was a man in the field. He was a great farmer, agriculturalist. Yaakov Ish Tam. Yaakov was pure. Tam is generally related to the bris milah, meaning that the Jewish people were going to have a covenant with Hashem. We're going to have a bris, a covenant. And that's when Abraham was called Tam, after he got his bris milah, after he got his circumcision. And he's a Yoshev Ochalim. He sits in a tent. So it means that the Jewish people are going to be immersed in learning. We're going to learn for 4,000 years in our yeshivas. We're going to pass on the tradition of the Torah. And our main skill is going to be, accumulating wisdom, learning Torah. Whereas Eisav is going to be the mighty empire builder of the Roman Empire. And we'll see the different phases of the Roman Empire. We'll take a look at that soon. So Vaye'ehav Yitzchak as Eisav, and Yitzchak loved Eisav. So here's the question. So Yitzchak the Tzaddik, who's carrying on the mission of Abraham, why does he love Eisav? So Yitzchak was the embodiment of the Sephira, the 10 Sephiros of Gevurah. It means strength, self-control. So he was a master of like controlling his emotions, controlling himself, staying away from Avera, and then redigging the wells. We see in this Parsha, redigging the wells of Avraham, the wells of Torah. And he saw in Eisav, he saw an avoda of Hashem, like serving Hashem in the way he did. That he wanted to help Eisav fight his battle against the Yetzer Hara, the evil impulse, the dark side. And he wanted to help Eisav, and he loved the avoda of Eisav, and that was more towards his midos. And then it said, Ki tzaya b'fiv. And he was a great hunter. He trapped in his mouth, he trapped things to eat, but it also means that Eisav is a brilliant speaker. His descendants, his children, became like the great politicians, the emperors of ancient Rome, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and in their pinnacle, the golden age of Rome, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who was friends with, Rebbe Hanasi, Yehuda, the prince. And you would see in the modern day politicians now, I mean, you can, pick, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, John F. Kennedy, I don't know. I guess, I mean, I would assume that all the presidents of America have been descendants of Esau, but they're all great speakers. They're great at oratory, and we'll see through history the kings of Esau, but they're great at convincing people, to follow them. You see these politicians that convince people to give them money, give them their time, all sayibapi. They trap people with the way they speak. So Rivka ocheves Yaakov, but Rebecca loved Yaakov. So Rivka saw the deception. She saw, the cunning talk in the house of Bethuel and her brother Lavan, who are master manipulators. So she didn't fall for Esav's, lies. She saw through the veneer of Eisav and saw that he was, very much like Lavan and Bethuel, and is not good. And he had lost his battle with the Yetzer Hara. He was overcome with the Yetzer Hara. And and she loved Yaakov. She loved the avoda of Yaakov more of like, learning and working on the great midos, the good personal characteristics. And Rivka favored Yaakov. So then one day, Vayazed Yaakov Nazid. So Yaakov was making a stew because when they were both 15 years old, the twins were 15, Abraham passed away and they were in mourning, and he was making a lentil stew. So then Eisav min hasadeh v'hu ayef. And then Eisav came out from the field, and he was really hungry, and he was tired, he was fatigued. So the Midrash tells us that this is when Eisav went, what we call off the derech. He went off the path, the derech Hashem, off the path of Hashem, and he was no longer fit to carry on the mission of Avraham and Yitzchak, who wanted to tell the world, give knowledge of Hashem to the world, that there is infinite being that's created everything and loves us, and to teach the Torah to the world. And Esau was no longer fit. And the Midrash tells us that he went out and he murdered like Nimrod's son to get his special cloak that he had inherited from Adam Arishon to control the animals with. And he had honest a woman, he violated a woman, and just all these averas that he had done, that day. And he was tired from avera, tired from sin. And Yaakov saw that clearly this is not, even though Esau was born first, he was not fit. He was not fit to carry on the mission, of the Jewish people. So Vayomer Eisav el Yaakov. So he says to, Eisav says to Yaakov, he says, "How itenina min ha'adom? Give me some of that red stuff, those red lentils that you're cooking. Ha'adom hazeh." Now, and it's so interesting because the lentils are the food of mourners, and they're round. And it represents, the roundness of life, the circular quality of life. And this was the main philosophical difference between Eisav and Yaakov, because Eisav only saw olam hazeh. Eisav only saw this world, the world of physical pleasures, and he had no interest in olam haba, the earning, the spiritual reward in the world to come. So he had no interest in the Torah and the mitzvahs. He only wanted to engage in all the physical desires of this world, and he didn't want to follow the Torah. Whereas we see Yaakov, he's making the traditional, mourner's food of the Adasim, and he sees it differently. He sees that it's a mitzvah to mourn. We have a mitzvah to mourn our, our loved ones that have passed away, and he's cooking the mourner's dish for his father Yitzchak, and he's doing the mitzvah, the Torah, of honoring, our relatives that passed away. So we see the difference in philosophy. So then Yaakov, Vayomer Yaakov, Nikra Chayom Es Bechora Sekali. Sell me your birthright. I see you're not worthy of being the Bechor. You don't want to carry on the mission of Avraham and Yitzchak, so please sell it to me. So then Eisav says, but Yomer Eisav, hine anochi holek lamus. So he says, I'm going to die. Eisav said, what do I need Olam Haba, the world to come? Why do I need the Torah and the mitzvahs, Chas v'shalom? Because I only see this world. I'm going to die, and I want to get, and Eisav wants to get all his pleasures in this world, and we see this very much in the Roman Empire. And this is the philosophical difference. So Yaakov gets Eisav to sell the birthright. He gives him this lentil soup that he wants right away. And then I think also the Midrash says they gave him a large sum of money. And then Yaakov is going to carry on the mission. But it's interesting. So in order to get the bracha, the blessing from Yitzchak, Rivka and Yaakov had to engage in this deception where they, Rivka dresses Yaakov in the garments that he'd taken from Nimrod, these hunting garments that were from Adam Arishon. They were special garments, I think, made by Hashem, and you can control all the animals with them. And they put the goat skin on top of him, and then he comes in. So Yitzchak says, this is the, when we see it later in the Parsha, he says, this is the, this is the kol Yaakov. You have the voice of Yaakov. You have the tefillah, the prayer of Yaakov. You have the leaning of the Torah, the singing of the Torah like Yaakov. You have, leaning Gemara, learning the Torah Shabbat Peh. Your voice is Yaakov's, but Yad Yedei Eisav, but your hands are the hands of Eisav. So what does this mean? So what does this mean that Yaakov, the Jewish people, had to take over both roles? So the Or Gedalia, Rabbi Gedalia Shor, he says something incredible in his Sefer, the Or Gedalia. He says that what was the plan? What was Hashem's plan for Eisav? Eisav was supposed to marry Leah, and they would have 6 of the tribes of the Jewish people, and they would be the kings and the warriors, and Esau's children would be holy warriors and fight for Hashem and fight for the Torah and the mitzvahs. But Eisav, he was seduced to the dark side. He went after the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, actually became his Sar. He became the guardian angel of the nation of Eisav, of Edom, is the Yetzer Hara, is the Satan. And you can see this in the ancient Roman Empire, and just like the morality, the lack of morality, and just the overindulgence in the pleasures of this world. We see this all throughout, the Western history. And then, as opposed to Yaakov, and the path is, the learning Torah, sitting in the tent, sitting in the yeshivas learning Torah. But now Yaakov also has to fight the battles. So we haven't seen this so much. There is, an army in Israel right now, but they're not fighting the battle. They're not fighting the battle for the Torah and the mitzvahs. They're not fighting the battle for Hashem. They're fighting in their own ideology, Zionism, which is not exactly the mission of the Jewish people. So we'll see, B'ezrat Hashem, the coming of Mashiach, the coming of Messiah, that the Jewish people will also have to rise up and join the battle to fight for Hashem's honor in the world and fight for, the Torah and the mitzvahs. So we see, interesting, so we see the conflict of the brothers, and we see it all throughout, Western history. I said we were in 2021 years of the Gullus Edom, of the exile, the Roman exile, and there's been 10, phases of the Roman Empire. It's very fascinating. So we see it, there's a vision in Sefer Daniel. Daniel had a vision, and Hashem gave him a vision of all history. And he saw an image of he saw these 4 beasts, and they were the 4 empires. So first you had Bavel, you had the Babylonian Empire, and then you had the Persian Empire, and then you had the Greek Empire, and then finally the Roman Empire. So some people think the Roman Empire ended a long time ago, because we had the ancient Roman Empire, and then we had Constantine, Emperor Constantine, and he builds. So that was we had the Western Roman Empire in Rome. And then the original, emperors, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, all the way through Vespasian. And then we see, the 11th, his son, Vespasian's son, Titus, destroys destroys the second temple, the second Beis Hamikdash. So Daniel had this vision of this terrifying 4th beast. And this 4th beast had 10 horns. And then a little horn comes and knocks off the 3 horns before. So it's very fascinating. So we see the 11th horn was Emperor Titus, and he destroys the second Beis Hamikdash. But all of Western history now has been somewhat of these 10 horns, the 10 phases of the Roman Empire. So first we see the first phase is the ancient Roman Empire, Julius Caesar, all the way through Vespasian, and then his son Titus is the little horn. But then we see the whole history of the West. So the first horn is the ancient Roman Empire, and then the second step is Emperor Constantine, and he adopts Christianity as now the national religion of the Roman Empire, and he founds the Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople, in modern-day Turkey, and that's called the Byzantine Empire. And then it just starts progressing through history, and there's just different phases. We see Charlemagne's empire, like a new Western empire in France, and the Vatican itself, the popes of the Vatican, the bearers of Christianity, they become very powerful in their own right. And then we start to progress through history. So I don't know if I can get these all perfectly, but we have, we see the rise of, the great, Spanish Empire. And then we see the British Empire. And then we see the French Empire and the Russian Empire. And, the France, with Napoleon and that power there. And then we have these 10 different phases. And then as they start to explore the new world, we have the three last of the 10 horns. So we have Spain, France, and England, the British Empire, and they start to explore the West, North and South America, as we call them now. And then we see the little horn, and the little horn, I think the 11th part, the little horn, the final phase of all the history of the empires is America. The United States of America is the little horn in the grand scheme of all of the history of the Roman Empire. And we see something a little different here. We still see, it's a Christian nation, but there's something new here because all the Enlightenment has come from Europe and come into America. And there's a battle in America. There's a battle that, there's no national church in America, but it's secular. It's novos. Nunc capitis novos order secularum, excuse me for my poor Latin, but it's like announcing the birth of a new order of secular power, atheist power now, like getting away from even, the church, the Christianity, and into atheism, pushing secularism and the Enlightenment and atheism. And this is the final phase before the coming of Mashiach. And then the vision is that Daniel saw a man come from the clouds, from the skies. This is one of the visions of Mashiach, of the Messiah coming. And then talking, not once again, not fighting with mighty armies, but just speaking the truth in a soft voice, not even breaking a little branch, that's already broke, but speaking the truth to the world. And it becomes a battle perception, it becomes a battle of ideas. It becomes a battle of what is the nature reality. And it's the conflict between these two brothers of Yaakov and Eisav. But Mashiach, the descendant of Yaakov, of Jacob, is going to talk to the world, teach the world Torah, give the world clarity that there's one infinite being that's created us all, created everything, and loves us all, and reattaching the world to Hashem, reattaching the world to this infinite being. And that's the battles of the two brothers. And you see the unfolding, of all history. And Bezrat Hashem, may we soon see the coming of Mashiach and see, a world that recognizes Hashem in the end. So war finally in an end of all this. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great Shabbos, and I hope to see you back again soon on Sweet and Good.